So mostly tonight what I want to leave you with is an idea of how to plan a tutoring session. Like when you sit down to read with a student, how to kind of pull it apart so that you can do some word work or some sound work, and then get into the bigger ideas of reading also, but how to kind of separate those in your mind depending on where that student falls. But before we start on that, I just want to talk a little bit about what readers do. And think about yourself as a reader, is that everybody in this room is an expert reader. And so you have that to fall back on as you work with your students. So on your form, you have this one that says guiding the reading. Looks like that. And this was completed, it's a little piece of research from a number of years ago, where a couple people wanted to say, well, what do expert readers do? And they just kind of made this ended up with this document of like before, during, and after reading, what is it that you do? These are all the ways that when you sit down to read, you think in these ways. You don't realize that you do it, you're an expert. It's automatic. You switch, you predict, you infer, you think about it. And you don't stop to say, now I need to make a prediction. You just do it. But the problem is that the kids we're reading with, or that you're reading with, they have not been taught to think in this way at all. And most of them, many of the students that I worked with a number of years ago that were refugees, that thought of themselves as good readers, would say, well, it's words, words, words. What do you mean I need to tell you what it means? I read the words. And not even getting that there should be a meaning on the other side of that. And so part of your job is to, in the end, is have them do these things right here. I had a couple articles, but I think, we'll skip that. But one of the things I challenge you, this is not something you can sit down with kids. You can't sit and just teach from this, but the really useful thing with this is that when you're at home and you're reading, I want you to practice noticing your thinking. Start noticing that when you pick up a book, this is a very young book, but just imagine that you spend a minute on the cover, that you spend a minute previewing that book, noticing when you reread or when you make a prediction. What point of when you're reading do you think, I know what's going to happen next? Or when do you understand the emotions of the character? Because I bet that out of the refugee population, they are not getting that the characters should ever convey an emotion to you as a reader. And so start noticing that, and it'll help you later to learn to communicate that to the students that you work with. Would anybody want to try to do this out loud, or was that too? I had an article that I was going to demonstrate if someone wanted to read the beginning of it out loud. Okay, so I want you to notice, to see if we can notice what type of thinking that you're doing as you look at this. This is a 12th grade reading passage.
Starting with the papal bull.
Yes.
The papal bull, Inter Cateria, issued by Pope Alexander VI on May 4th, 1493, played a central role in the Spanish conquest of the New World. The document supported Spain's strategy to ensure its exclusive right to the lands discovered by Columbus the previous year. It established a demarcation line 100 leagues west of the Azores and Cape Verde Islands, and assigned Spain the exclusive right to acquire territorial possessions and trade in all lands west of that line.
And I'm going to stop you for a second. Do you feel like you understand what you just read?
I do, but I am a history buff. So.
Okay. So, did you understand listening to him, or are you a little bit not sure what he's reading about? Maybe kind of.
Be honest, you're
I'm
not
visual.
going
I could picture it on the map
Right.
where the
Yeah.
Azores were and Spain and all of that. So.
Can you tell me what you would do right now if you were reading this and you weren't sure? What is the first thing you would do to help yourself? Because you all understand that you need to understand.
Go back and read it again.
Read it again.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that is the number one strategy that readers do, is read it again.
Right.
And then in doing that, you slow down or you refer to something. Yeah, and I mean, I just wanted to do that beginning to kind of
I think a
demonstrate
globe
that.
would help.
A globe, a visual would help,
Yes.
of course. When I printed this out and I read the first part, I didn't understand it at first. I was like, what is this about? And I skipped down and then went back. It was like, and then it made sense when it
has to do with something called the Doctrine of Discovery, which goes back to a papal bull issued by one of the Alexanders, a pope, in 1452, and that's as far as I'll go.
Okay, so at home, I challenge you to really use this guiding the reading. Have it beside you and read something and try to really think about what you're doing. Because one of the things that's going to be a great strategy with the students is thinking out loud. Not teaching them, but when they're reading and you're reading with them, like, oh, I know what's going to happen because he just slammed the door and he's mad. And doing that thinking out loud for the students so that they can hear and hear that modeled and learn how to think, because it has to be made visual. But
sorry, just a question. Like, instead of saying, when you take the book and you have the cover, instead of saying like, okay, what's the title and what do you see on the cover, you would recommend saying like, oh, I see the title is such and such, and oh, I see this happening on the cover.
If the child is really willing and interested, sure, they'll read the title and they'll tell you, I think this is going to be about two friends or whatever's on the cover. But if they're not willing, it's a great way to start conversation, is to say like, is you do the noticing, you do that thinking and put it out there on the table. And one of the things about refugee kids is that when you ask them to talk about their reading, that social piece of reading is where we discuss the story and talk about it. How did it make you feel? That is absolutely foreign to them. That there is a social aspect to reading. I've read it. Okay, I'm done. I shouldn't have to say another thing. And so having that out loud piece, you're modeling it for them. But before they get there, before they get to that point of inferring and predicting and all that, the things that really are challenging is that they have to understand that there's a sound symbol relationship, and that there are chunks in our language, like I says A, things like that. They don't have the ability to sound out a word and say, is that a real word or not? Which is what most American raised kids do, is they have enough background to say, oh, that's a real word or not. You have to develop fluency for reading that's smooth, and these things come together to allow for comprehension. So we have to work on all of those parts. Comprehension is a result of having a certain speed while you read, roughly. And then we have to talk about vocabulary. Size of vocabulary is directly related in a lot of ways to comprehension. So we've got that struggle to overcome. And one of the things we know about vocabulary is that it does not work to get a list of words, copy the definitions, and study the definitions. That it doesn't have any effect on comprehension. That it does nothing. And that's probably what most of the kids have in class, is a list of 20 words. So it doesn't work. But what does work is teaching a few words across many days. So we're going to talk about some ways to do that. Okay. Now, you see this sheet that you have? This is just a menu, or like a way to think about going through tutoring. You would never have time to go across and do all of these things. But it's broken into categories, starting with the most simple, smallest piece, down to reading, which is, of course, the big idea of what you're doing. I have game on there because for some kids it's really nice to end on a little fun something. So we're going to talk about these different activities here so that you have those as choices in your repertoire when you sit down with a student to work with them. So it might be helpful to keep this out so you can kind of see where we are. So for many kids, many refugee kids, the first thing I will work on is warming up with sounds. But I've even worked with a high school student once that was having fluency trouble. He was a refugee. We worked on his sounds, and his reading drastically improved just by going back to the kind of bare bones of it. And you have a sheet in your kind of subject. It looks like it's called Sound Warm Up. If you are working with a kid who needs to do this, This should take no more than 2 minutes, probably less. 2 minutes would be the long side of it. It's in the other stack. Sorry, I don't have a good way of. So,
Leah, can I interrupt really fast?
yeah.
This menu that you have here, Leah taught me and Peter this whole thing like a year ago, and I turned it all and put it all like in a big binder.
Oh,
And so
wow.
like I have the menu in the front and all of them. What I'm trying to say is I have all of this here that I keep in the room over there, and so don't feel like you necessarily need to keep track of all of these things, because if you're working with a student, I can also just grab this for you.
And this is probably a little different than what we did.
Okay, some of the things look very familiar.
Yeah, they should.
Yeah, so
Well, cool.
just to let you all know that's over there.
So if I was going to have a student do this, they simply go through and make the sounds. One rule here, though. You have to have the student trim the sound. You cannot allow the consonants to have an on the end. American-raised kids do this. If you're sounding out the word mat, a 6-year-old American kid might say ma, at, ta. They're going to figure out that mat is the word underneath, usually. A refugee kid is going to end up with ma'ata and not know that it's the wrong word. So this is b, n, k, p, d, qu. You go through, and if there's a with an open mouth, have them trim it. Their mouth should not open. It's kind of picky, but it's important, or your sounding out is not going to stick together in the end. This would be practiced with a kid until they're fast. I'm sorry, let me re-say this. You would only do it once in a tutoring session, but you would come back to it week by week until they can say so it's that automatic. Yes.
I have a question. The kids really hit home. It seemed very true what you said, that these kids, they just think reading is just reading words.
Mhm.
That's it. And how did they learn to read? That will help me, because I only know the way where you sound things out.
Right.
So
Most of the kids that I've worked with do not have the understanding, like a true understanding, that all the letters have a sound and that you can use that as a problem solving.
but somehow they can
thing.
sort of read. So I don't know how they do
Some
it.
of it's, memorization of chunks of words or pieces. But a lot of most of the kids are missing at least a few of the letters altogether. So I don't have a really great
Okay,
answer
so
for
it's
you.
good to just go back.
Yeah, and then this
Okay.
is not a big, you do it fast, get it out of the way, just to kind of start filling in that groundwork. The short vowels are very important. Is when they see the A-E-I-O-U, it's for the short sounds. Very important. Most of the refugee kids I worked with, I could work on this for so long, and they say, Miss Leah, you're still doing the short vowels and they all sound the same. So they don't hear it, So you really have to think about where your mouth is. And your mouth opens on the vowels. That's why the word, so it's ah, your tongue kind of comes out. Ah, eh, I, ah, and you use your diaphragm like you do that hit in the stomach. You should be able to feel it. And that can help the kids on sounding out a word. If you stick your tongue out, they'll know to get that ah out of there. Instead of keeping their mouths kind of closed the whole time, like met, not really getting that vowel out.
Right. The vowel sounds, you're describing the English language
Yeah.
vowel sound.
Yeah.
Some of these kids, there's at least a couple of these kids that I think their first language is French. The
Right.
vowel sounds very different.
It does, and that I've run into that too, where it's so close but it's different, and you just have to keep. They need to have. It's a little bit more getting into the English so that they can hear and understand other people and help them with their spelling in English too, because it's all connected. So they need to be able to differentiate this French from the English.
There are a lot of Africans that are
Mm-hmm.
from former French colonies, and
Yeah.
it's usually a French Creole, but it's French.
Yeah.
The vowel sounds are French.
Yeah. I've run into that.
I'm admitting I don't know something. The X on this one. Okay.
I was going to say, is there something you can listen to other than you right now so that you can reproduce the sounds accurately? Because that doesn't come naturally to us. It doesn't to me, I
Doesn't to
mean,
me either.
I can take
No,
a note.
it's-
I have no idea. But I'll write that down and
thank you,
try to find it
Leah,
out.
thank you, because I'm,
I'll write it down. Yeah.
Thank you.
I believe that if you Google it, this sounds, I believe there's that last.
audio, there's an audio
Yeah.
thing.
Probably. I
If
mean,
you-
I've never.
If you Google English phonemes, then you'll get probably a list of audio.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, there is a great course out there too. It's taught by some linguist who talked about the great vowel shift that occurred in English and how all the European vowel sounds are very different from the English vowel sounds. So it's pretty wild.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
So that warm-up is kind of specific, but it is, remember that it's a very fast thing and you move on. You don't want to get bogged down into that. Now the next thing, under pattern work, that's talking about the pieces within a word. So like helping is to help decode and break words apart. The first thing there, of course, is 37 rhymes. That is spelled correctly. It's the chunk of the word after the beginning sound. But this is an activity that you would only do with your earliest readers. This is not something, if someone's reading confidently, skip it. But these are you have this on the other side of your sound warm-up. These are the 37 most common chunks of words. Okay? What I don't have on here is a list of just the consonants by themselves. Basically, you would pick one. So I'm just gonna start this process here just to show you how you would do this, okay? So you make a 3-column chart and you ask your student, let's say that you're going to do which chunk would you like to do tonight? Is it, at. Okay, let's do at. And I'm going to do it in 3 columns. Okay, so this first column is for the shortest words, medium words, long words. You're going to go through with the consonants. You got a chart of the consonants. Thank you.
And on the back's the one.
And so you're going to put the book at that and go down. And I will write down the ones that are real words because I don't expect you to necessarily know if it's a real word or not a real word. Bat. Cat. That.
Depends who you ask.
Fat. Cat. Hat. Okay, and let's stop there. Imagine that she went through the whole alphabet. From there, I'm going to ask her to start on the blends, and those are our medium length words. Black. Flat. 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 Slat. Rat. Okay, that's good. And then here, I'm going to generate this column. This is such a beginning student, she's not going to know this, but I need to come up with words that are more than one syllable. So, flatter,
Flatter.
What's that?
I said flatter.
Flatter, yeah. Flatter. Well, there doesn't have a T in it. No. Or ladder, as in,
Or flatten.
or the ladder.
Yeah. Ladder.
Matter.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, ladder's a good one.
All right, so then let's imagine you can see. And in this column, it's also not important that you have a long list of words, just a couple that are more than one syllable. We're done, and now the student, I would say, well, which column do you want to read first? Maybe she picks this one. She reads them, she reads them, she reads them. And the great practice here is that she's now done a tremendous amount of practice with sounding out, with a lot of repetition. This is going to become an automatic chunk here. She's going to know this, she's going to see it. You're going to see it in the reading when you get to a book that same night. You'll be able to point it out. And when kids are this early on in their reading, this is from a different, this is actually from Sir Jean, and it was at. But so got interested in counting how many words did I make. We made 21 words, and then the next we did it again and again, and it's sort of this collection that just becomes fun. If this activity feels too easy, the child doesn't need it anymore. They've got that sounding out, you can move on, you don't need to do it again. Okay? But from there, let's look at word building and sorting. This is probably going to hit the range of most of your kids. Did you have some of the books too? Yep. Okay. So the word building.
I also have these letters. Do you do it that way? Or do you use cards?
But that's great. That makes it easier for the tutors.
Yeah.
So the word building is from a book. You can create it on your own if you want, but having a book with the lesson already ready makes it a lot faster. And this says second grade. So the kids that are just reading a little bit, that are kind of stuttering around words.
Certainly worked for Jonathan.
Yeah, and he was in
Seventh and then eighth.
Eighth grade when
Yeah.
we did this, and this worked really well. This really helps them get the understanding that because the S is the second letter, like that makes a difference than if it was that where the letters sit in the word makes a really big difference. The lesson. So this lesson is raincoats. That's going to be your secret word. The student's not going to know that it's raincoats, okay? And let me just use, I'm sorry, I'm going to,
You should act it out.
yeah. Okay. Somebody want to be the guinea pig?
What do you need?
Okay. So these are the letters. And Peter's going to be the student. And Peter has already put these in alphabetical order for us. And he pulled the vowels out to the side because you always want them to know that vowels are special and important. And so you have them pulled to the side. And maybe we reviewed that E says eh and the O says ah. And so then I have my words here that he's going to spell. He doesn't see this. So the first word is on. Just move them.
Just do.
Just move them.
Oh.
Okay, now here's the important step. Okay, you spelled on, yay. Now, add a sound. Now this is the important step. Add a sound and spell con.
Not letter, a sound.
A sound, yeah.
Ka.
Con.
Ka.
Not
Yes.
ka.
Good job, Caroline.
Thank you.
And so that's important that he didn't put the O and the N away, but it's adding and it's building, and where that letter goes is important. And of course, some of them, the next word would be change a sound and make cut. Okay, and then we would go on from there. Some of them are, switch a sound or whatever, but you're wanting them to keep that chunk that they can keep and build around and understand.
Yeah, reversing them sometimes is fun.
Mm-hmm. Like not to ton or something.
Or talk from cot.
Right, exactly. And then when you're done, and with this student this summer, one of the girls I worked with was a very early reader, and so I would take the time to show her I would take these words out and show her which words rhyme, so that she could see that. And then, if you can spell nest, because she's already done it, you could spell best. And then she's somewhat generalizing. She's seeing this chunk, and she's taking it. She would spell it out loud or take it on a pencil and write it down. This is you will really see a lot of growth in your students kind of getting over a hump doing this activity. Any questions about that?
I just want to say I have a stack of foam letters here, and the vowels are already red, a different color. And so I did this with some students the other day. Instead of writing the letters on a piece of paper, you just pull out the letters for that big word, and then they use those letters to create the words as you go. And doing it, especially this way, it's really fun for
Yeah.
them. Other kids were joining and were like, I want to do this
Yeah.
too. And
Kids
yeah.
tend to love this activity, and all the words are there.
It's really no prep work for you as a
it's all
teacher.
really easy.
Yeah.
And then the other one is a little bit more challenging, are
And is
words.
that's called wordless, or what is
No,
that? Word-
that is, did I have it as building words or
Word
making
building or
words?
sort.
Word
Okay.
building.
Okay.
And unfortunately, the name of the book is Making Words, and for some reason I had moved to the word building in my brain.
Okay.
She also, Natalie also has books of sorts, which is the orangish book under here. And do you have 1 or 2 books?
I just have one,
Okay.
so I would make copies out of it.
Yeah, which level do you have? Oh, good. Yes.
The one you told me to get.
Okay. So the sorts are, it's a sheet and you just make a copy and you cut the words apart. So then you give these to the student. And so there's going to be 1 or 2 patterns within here. And what you're wanting them to do is move the words around and see the pattern and put it into the group so they're doing that thinking. Like, oh, I see this and this happens all the time, this AI, and all these words have AY, but they sound the same, and they're doing some of this figuring out as they go. If I was working with a student who is really early on in reading, and reading is everything is being sounded out, I would tell them the patterns. It's enough work that they're doing it, and if you say, we're looking at, this one is this is an early sort. We're just looking at the short vowels. We're going to sort these words by the vowel. And they put the A words, the E words, the I, O, and U. And then you read them. This is an activity you can come back to and do another session the next time you're with your student, because there is always a benefit to getting a little speed with the words that they're reading. I'm going to put aside the one that's the easiest. Get out one that's a little harder. Now this is a more advanced. It comes from that book. And this one, here are the headers. Can you guys see from there? It's like OI and OU. A kid who's doing this sort, I would take these headings away and wouldn't show it to them. And I would say, let's put these words out, and I want you to figure out what the pattern is, because I want them to see that. And we've probably already been reading some of these words. And so then they're going to sort and move them around and find that out.
Is there a right answer or a wrong answer?
It's a good question. You usually have a goal. I would want the student to see the OU and the OW in here. Often, a lot of the kids will find funny things that they see as the pattern, like, oh, these words start with the letter S, so I'm going to put them over here, and these words have an F in them, which has nothing to do. And so you don't want to say that's wrong, like that is a way to sort them, but I really want to look at the vowels today. And so you kind of redirect, and you acknowledge and you give them some credit for seeing something and moving it around. There's some credit to be given for that. Once they get it, and they would say, oh yeah, you're right. The OU says ow and OW says ow. Now let's read the words. And again, this can be done the next week when you sit down with the kid. Let's see if we can do it faster today. How fast can you get these words put into the groups? There's a greater memory formed for the patterns within the words if they're having to figure something out. So those are the sorts. And it just requires copying and cutting.
Do you ever have the students cut as you go? Or is it important
I
that
have in the
teacher-
classroom. I don't when I'm tutoring, but it's totally something that you could leave them and then.
I just
Yes.
mean like you could say a word and ask them to cut that one out. Is there any benefit in like
Yeah,
making
because they have to
cutting
find
time?
it on the page. So you could do it that way as like, that's kind of a game, or you could even just say, cut this apart and I'll be back in 3 minutes and work with you. So either way, yeah. And then of course, and then after that is word list. This is just like a fast, quick way to look at a few patterns. This came out of, who was this from? This was not a refugee student, but we were working on AR. I wrote down 6 words and she just read them to me. No big deal, but just kind of drilling in that AR a little bit more. This is kind of if you just have 2 minutes. I have a list of patterns. I wasn't sure if it would be usable, but I'm going to leave it with you that you can choose patterns from. But I'll show it to you. Okay. All right, sight words. So we've done sound warm up, pattern word, sight words. Sight words is another just quick thing you just want to run through for those early readers.
I just bought these the other day, Leah.
You did? Good.
Yes.
Well, I have sight phrases.
Okay.
So these are, I don't know if you've heard of Fry's sight words, just common words that are in print. And these are just, you can just download them off the internet. These are Fry's sight word phrases, the most common 600 words put into phrases. The good thing about this for these students is that it gives them just a teeny bit of practice with reading a phrase, with common words. Sight words make up 50% of what's in print. So if you get these words out of the way, you're halfway there, sort of. You can you can keep it on a page. I would do like say, depending on if the child 5 to 10, depending on the level of the reader, but just say we're just going to read this first 10. Just put a dot by the ones that are automatic. Don't dot the ones that they slow down on. Next week we're going to do 10 again. Go back and pick up those others. Practice. So you're practicing again on the ones that didn't get the dot, and just move through it and just trust that over time they'll gain. With this, you don't want to get bogged down in it. Sometimes it's, it just, you see how this is prints in 3 columns? To cut it and just put it on a ring, for some kids it feels like, as they work on it, that they're going through the pages. I think for the earliest readers, having anything to say, like, we're moving on, we're going on, is like, it helps to build that sense of achievement that can move to the next thing. Okay. So now let's look at vocabulary. So in your notes, you have a page that's titled Vocabulary. And I put some facts about vocabulary development because it's so important for this population. Vocabulary, like we said already, vocabulary that is studied from a list of definitions does not transfer to comprehension. Those words just stay as a list of definitions. They're used on a test, and that's it. But vocabulary development increases when students have a visual image with the word meaning, and when the words are categorized into a group, so they're somehow related to each other. So they're not random. It takes around 15 encounters with a word for you to actually be able to use it. And that's 15 different encounters, not a repetition of the same definition. That's a lot. It's a little scary, actually. In order to comprehend spoken or written words, a student must know about 95% of the words on the page. Also a little scary. And a word is appropriate to be taught if you don't have to define the definition. So my favorite way of working on vocabulary is doing linear arrays. And I brought some. These are a little bit, you have to make these yourself. Maybe you guys can make them in groups or something, but they're pretty fun. So this is actually one that came from Liz's classroom years and years ago.
That's a long time ago.
So this one, so now that I said about linear arrays, this one is not a linear array, but it follows the same principles. So we're going to talk about size words. And so we're going to talk about words that mean small, medium, and large. And so I don't have images to go with these, but images would be good. So like we might introduce the word gigantic and tape it up here. Immense, just the word small. Massive, standard, average, colossal. And so here's the thing, is like let's take the words, let's imagine that we've got these words kind of taped up here, kind of in the right place. And now we're going to spend, and we're going to do this stack of words. I would do over several sessions with the student. I wouldn't walk away from this and expect that they got it in one session. But I just want to talk about colossal, massive and gigantic. Which one do you think is bigger? Anybody have an opinion about that? There's no right answer to this, by the way. Colossal.
Colossal.
So let's move colossal.
There's the right answer.
Yes.
Let's move colossal up higher. And what about between massive and gigantic? Okay. So then we would maybe put gigantic here and massive. You're getting an opinion out of the kids that one is, and of course, if it's a wrong answer, if it was a word like standard, you would fix that. But within these words, you're helping them to form an idea of how to use that word. You might also spend time like colossal. Well, how do I use that word? Sometimes we think about colossal messes or colossal buildings. And maybe that would help you with the image that you create with this picture. It could be an image that the student makes that you print from the internet. But you would have these out. And then the next time you might have the student arrange them on here and see what do they remember, and you do it together. And it's an activity of moving and talking and coming up with some ideas to why the words are where they are. So something as basic as size is something that they're going to run into in their reading all the time. And authors don't usually say small, medium, and large. So it's one more clue into the reading. Okay. So this one is more of a linear array. So you have a line, and you want two opposites at the end. These words right here are about walking or running. So we might do this end is slow, this end is fast. If I do this on the floor, can you guys see or not really?
No.
On the table?
Can I hold things? Or is it
Yeah.
too many?
It's too many.
Maybe on the ledge of the
Oh,
screen there, I don't know what to say.
So with this, I have pictures, I have words, and I have definitions. So you might start with the pictures. We're going to put these in the order from the slowest to the fastest. Okay, so here. Sometimes with these, by the way, I will print two pictures for one word if I find two fun pictures, or two words that go with one picture, because there's this idea of words, that words are for playing with. Words have multiple meanings. We use them in different ways, and you want that to be part of your message. If you get stuck on words as being having a single meaning that has to be used, that is going to inhibit their comprehension over time. So this is people racing, and this is a fuzzy picture. Jogging. You see that? Leopard or jaguar or something. This is a woman carrying a super heavy bag. And a bear. Okay. This is people walking, just very casually. And two men walking in really nice suits. I'm running out of room here. And hiking. I'm going to put the hikers sideways. Okay. So now, sometimes it's easier to start with the definitions, because that can describe, because hopefully my definitions don't need to be defined. They should understand what's on these definition cards. Can you match this writing to the word? To walk heavily. Well, walking heavily is not down here. It's down here where this woman is carrying the heavy bag, and maybe the bear is walking heavily too. Walking for enjoyment, and then let's say running slowly. I'm not going to do all of these. Running as fast as you can. Okay. Now that we've done that, now as the tutor or the teacher, you're going to have to help match the word. Many of these words will be brand new. It's just, you're just starting to kind of create that connection. And so then you would see if they know any first. So we would put lumber down here with walking heavily. These guys are sprinting in a race. Dash, saunter, stroll, hike, scurry, prowl, and jog. And so then we have it, you know, and you've got this set of words. All of these words can be acted out if you wanted to on another session. You would probably end up doing this activity across 3 different sessions before a student can just match picture and word and definition. And it's something they can do, they can practice doing, you know, along a line. So that's called an array. You can do it with anything. I brought examples in case anybody wanted to look at them, but I have a set of thinking words like pondering and meditating, and that doesn't necessarily make an array, but it's just a set of words with pictures and the same activity. Number words, texture words, anything like that. Any questions about this? Does that make sense?
The more you can create visuals, the stronger the retention.
Yes.
Or,
Yes.
so that, yeah, they're relating a word with an activity that they can
See.
see.
Yes. Yeah, so the more, if there's movement involved in their learning or the visuals, and there is research to show that people, that in learning a second language, that the visuals are much stronger than they are for a
native
native
speaker.
English speaker.
How interesting.
So that's also to be used as something to rely on a little
Mhm.
bit. But, let's see. I'm supposed to be finishing now.
No, I said 10 or 20.
So then just think about ways that you could use the words, ways they could match it, just, you know, trying to make it fun, learning words as such should be a fun thing, something that's interesting. One important note is that when you're reading a book with them, if in the text the word is defined, the author goes back and sort of defines the word, please point that out to them. They probably have no clue that that's there, or that they can use that information. And how do you use it? Oh, I see that defines that, so now I understand. Fill in the whole blank. What do you understand from that? Show them that. Model it. No one's teaching them that. When you sit down with a book, and you're going to read a book with them, if it's a chapter book and you're going to do a chapter a session, don't try to teach from that book 3 words per reading session. Okay, more than that, the average person, once you're past like age 8 or 9, you can learn 3 words a day. So don't just use that number. It's better to they get a couple of those than none at all. And try to pick words that you think help with the comprehension, but don't worry about that too much. Okay, so after vocabulary, you want to spend a little bit of time on fluency. Fluency work is for your earliest readers to kids who are grade reading level. Once they hit around 3rd grade reading level, the fluency work can be lessened. And you can do it only sometimes, or just do it really fast and don't spend a lot of time. But it is an important thing to do. So on this sheet that says fluency, there's 3 ways you can read with your students. Echo reading, partner reading, repeated reading, or I have Reader's Theater on there also. So these go from the most support to the least support. In echo reading, you read it first, and then the student reads exactly what you just read. You do enough that they can't just hold it in their memory and spit it back out, but not too much. I'll show you. Starting to make a big mess. So this is a passage. This was work with Sergine this summer. So this is a kind of beginning 1st grade passage. That's the whole thing right there. I read this to her, and then she read it back to me. And we did this a few weeks in a row, like a few sessions in a row. Someone that's a little bit more advanced in their reading, I wouldn't do that. Repeated reading, for kids that are kind of starting to read, sometimes repeated reading kids just love it. They'll go through a phase where they just want to do it every time, that they sit down with you. If the child does not want to do this, lay off, because it can be torture if they don't want to do this. But so, let's say it with this. I read it to her. She read it to me. If you could see, there's little pencil marks where I underlined or circled words that she had trouble with. And then I would say, well, this word was bright and that's light. Do you see what's the same about them? And this is reflects. I just gave those words. Well, then we would read it again. This time, I'm going to time you. I don't have the words on here, do I? So I counted these words. I'm going to time you for 1 minute. I'm going to see how far you get in 1 minute. On my hand, I'm also taking away the words that she doesn't read correctly, but I'm not telling her that. So she missed the word miles, bright, light, and reflect. So she made 4 errors. And let's say, I'm just going to make this match, even though this graph is very different. So let's say that was 36 correct words in a minute. Oh, Sir Jean, that was 36 correct words. Here's your little bar graph. Fill it in. The thing is my experience of doing this with kids is when they start seeing that bar go up, it can be a true, like a really big boost. And for kids that are just entering into this, like, I can read this, they sometimes want to do this over and over and over because they can see themselves going up. Around 3rd grade, you should be reading 90 correct words in a minute. If this were a student's data, I'm not going to tell them that their goal is 90 words. That's too low. But I might say, hey, our goal is 64 words. I want to see if you can get to 64 correct words over time, not with this one passage. Probably after 3, I see improvement. Let's just go on to another passage or another piece of reading. The idea of repeated reading, so like in this is true with this student, bright and light were troubles for her for like 3 times in a row. And then we were reading a different book that I brought a different day. Every IGH word she got correct. And I never taught it, but I think it was from this and working on it, it transferred into her other reading. So you do want, after about 3 passages, you would move on and go on to something else. And over time, you do see this bar starting to get taller until you start crossing that line. When it starts crossing the line, well, you set a new goal. Because the reading rate is related to comprehension. So that's why we're trying to boost that. Any questions about that? Does that sound doable to time and count things? Okay. Reader's Theater is a lot of fun. There are a lot of Reader's Theater available on the internet. The problem is they're usually made for whole classes. Some of them are for like 20 kids or some crazy number. If you can find a way to print them and just choose who does what, they are a lot of fun. These are just 2 that I made based on books I had read with kids. This one's Strega Nona, and this is The Relatives Came. And I just divided it in 2. And kids, we probably read this 10 times. But then I put all the hard vocabulary in here. All the words that were hard for the student when they read the book are in the Reader's Theater. But there's a lot of poems written for 2 voices. You can write a story about the kid's life if they told you something, or something funny about your life into this, if that's something that is interesting to you. Okay. And now let's go into comprehension. How much time do I have?
10 minutes.
Okay. Sorry, I'm so slow. Okay, comprehension is the big thing, right? So now if you've worked on decoding and patterns and all this, now we need to talk about getting some meaning out of what you're reading. So I suggest specifically doing a comprehension little mini lesson with your student that is not embedded in the big reading that you're trying to do. So I know Peter, in the past you've had like chapter books that you were reading with students. That I would say don't do the comprehension out of that chapter book. Step away, choose a small picture book, teach the comprehension lesson, move on, and then get into reading. That way you can say, remember when we did prediction? I need you to do that now, right here. And so it's not all mixed up into the book that you're reading. This chart here that has strategies and definitions, these go in order of difficulty. Predicting being the easiest, critiquing being by far the hardest. I would be surprised if you got into true synthesizing or critiquing at all. If you could get to inferring, if you could go straight through to predicting down to inferring, that would be a great year. So what I did is that after that, as I went, I elaborated more on each piece of comprehension in a way that you can use it with the kids. I made little charts. You see these little charts, like under making predictions, there's a little chart. This is what I'm suggesting you draw on a piece of notebook paper to do prediction with your students. This would be for making connections. That's the little chart you would draw and make to kind of add a visual. Would you like me to do a couple little lessons to show you? Or do you understand enough from the notes?
Do a lesson.
Okay.
Do one, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm gonna do, so let's say that you are doing making predictions. You've put this little chart on a piece of notebook paper. You've told your student, we're gonna practice doing predictions. I would not be afraid to pull this book out with middle school students to just show them. I have never read a book with the refugee kids where they said, that is too young for me. This would be okay. Comprehension lessons are a great time to read aloud. The kids do not hear enough read aloud. I'm going to start this. This is not necessarily a time your student would read because you want them to hear expression and proper pausing and all that. This hat is not mine. I just stole it. I stole it from a big fish. He was asleep when I did it. And he probably won't wake up for a long time. Stop. What do you think is going to happen in the story?
The fish is gonna be.
Fish is about to wake up.
The fish, well, he is awake. Yeah, the fish is going to be mad. Does anybody have another idea of what's going to happen?
I'm gonna go look for the hat.
He's going to go look for the hat. Yeah, so you just made a prediction. What's your clue? What's your clue how did you figure out that you think that he's going to be mad?
Because everybody's mad if you take their stuff.
So you're using your knowledge from your life, right? Do you have any information from the book, too?
Yeah, the eye is very wide. You know, like,
Yeah, those eyes wide. And it's also the opposite of what the little fish thinks, too, right? All of those are clues. Then we would keep reading because we want to find out, was our prediction right or wrong? If the prediction is wrong, the student still did a great job predicting. You want to acknowledge that it's not about being right with your prediction. It's about noticing clues, whether it's from your life or from the book, and using that information. And then you read and you find out. Okay?
Well,
He gets caught. And it is really great if you find text where you know the student's going to make a prediction and the prediction's going to be wrong, so that you can say, oh, you have to change your prediction. That is something we do as readers. In our complex text that we read, we make predictions and go, oh, whoa, that was wrong because I got this piece of information. That is another step of learning that can come later, but keep that in mind with prediction. Making connections tend to be easy and they're really fun. I'm going to skip to inferring. Inferring is very powerful and it can be difficult. It gets confused with predicting a lot, actually. Okay, so when you infer, you're reading along and you're using what's here in the story and then kind of what you know about the world, and it's coming together for a greater understanding. The most common way is that in a story you're reading and someone slams the door and leaves the room. Well, how did that character feel? The character was mad, right? Because we know that when you slam doors and you stomp out of rooms, you're probably angry. Books don't say that the person was angry, and the kids they don't take that and say, oh, he's slamming doors and stomping his feet, and then and go to that, or relating that to an emotion, even though they know that, but They don't know they're supposed to do that, I guess, is what is the problem. So, oh wait, I'm going to do. So this is truly a book. This is a picture book with no words. I've used this. I use this every year when I was teaching 6th grade. This is a story where the dog is left to babysit the baby, and then gets them out of the crib, takes him playing around the house. I'm going to go a little fast here. Now, where's the dog putting the baby? But you don't know that word, okay?
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
In a door?
He's got a little door. Do you see where he's putting the baby? Okay. Now the dog is running downstairs. He comes down. Well, there's the baby again. Well, how did the baby get there? So, I would say, right there at that point, what we know is the dog put the baby at some door. He ran downstairs, and then there's the baby again. Draw a picture of what happened. You'll get some convoluted pictures, but basically, you get this. The baby went down some kind of slide and landed on some kind of cloth, right? That information is not in the book. This is inferred, whether you understand laundry chutes or not. Most of us understand laundry chutes, but everybody would understand that this is not a cruel book, that nothing bad is going to happen. It's not a completely magical book. So something logical has to come from this. The great thing about this is that there's not a lot of language, and you can say, this is inferring. And you can always come back to this and say, remember this picture? This was inferring. So that this works really well. A way to use it with character, I'm not going to read this book to you. This is a little girl from Japan who has learned to make origami. She moves to America and wants to send her grandmother a gift. So, I don't know if I'm pronouncing this right, but obasan for Japanese grandmother. Okay. Obasan's birthday was in winter, and Yoko had no money to buy a birthday present. Yoko knew that thousands of miles away in Japan, Obasan's garden was cold and snowy. Obasan was waiting for the cranes to come back to her garden pond. So then she makes the origami. So let's imagine that I just read the whole book to you. Here, I might use this character chart for inferring that's on the next page. I know that Yoko, using inferences to understand character traits, is, what kind of person is she? What word would you use to describe the little girl who just made these things for her grandmother?
Thoughtful.
Thoughtful, that's the word I have.
Oh.
Yeah. No, on my sheet.
Oh.
She is thoughtful because in the text, what information did you just get out of the text that told you that Yoko is thoughtful?
She's very far away from someone but was thinking about that person.
She still thought about them, yeah. So she was thinking about them.
She did something for them.
She followed through and actually made something and sent it to them, right? Also, she thought about that mother and what her grandmother liked, right? Not what she liked. So the word thoughtful is never in this book, but we can all agree that she's thoughtful. That's inferring. That's what you want the kids to be getting, and they're not right now. The emotional part is missing, and that's inferring. So that's a way to think about character. There are some notes about nonfiction. Make sure you are reading some nonfiction with the kids, and that you're pointing out all the parts of it in sets and headings and graphs and charts and how it's related back to the text. A lot of the kids just skip all that stuff on the sides because it doesn't mean anything. So think about thinking what it means and how it helps you learn. Okay?
One of the things we are always contending with, Leah, is the kids just want to get through it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because they feel if they don't, they're going to come up short. They don't, it's almost impossible to get them to realize that doing a little bit well is better than doing a lot and not having a clue about what you've done just because you've finished.
Right.
And Peter, you're talking about like doing homework,
I
not just
am.
reading a book.
That's correct.
So that's where this nonfiction piece, like if you're reading a science text or a social
Yeah.
studies text, these would be good things maybe to do with that
Yeah.
before doing the homework.
Right.
Even, so that they maybe have comprehension before doing the
Yeah.
assignment.
So with the nonfiction, these are ways of using visual diagrams, if you want to go back and look at that later. And then also remember about activating background knowledge. That's part of the comprehension piece, using semantic maps, just jotting things down with sticky notes. What do I know about, whatever they're studying in science? And so they can kind of know, that's something a good reader does, is you get the topic ready in your brain. So helping them to see that on paper, that you're getting it ready. 2 minutes. Okay. So, and then the last thing is that the last part of your session with your student would be just to read a book for enjoyment. Do pull in some of the things like modeling, making a prediction. Definitely model the inferences that when you realize the emotions of a character, or take a minute and draw a picture of the setting. And how did you know that's what the setting? I'm not just making that up, but the words are here in the text. That's why I know the setting looks like this. So pull from this, but you can be a little looser. And last, just remember that you would never march across this whole chart. But it's a way of starting with the easiest skills, getting into the deeper things.
So it could be maybe with like a younger reader, you would stick on the first 3 columns. Not a younger, excuse me, earlier reader.
Right.
In the earlier column.
Yeah, this is definitely, with the earlier readers, you would stay heavily down here and end with reading. And with a more advanced reader, you would kind of start down here and spend most of your time reading. Yeah.
And I would also say, Leah, and I think this is something you helped me with Jonathan, is the more you can create games,
Yeah. Yeah.
the more engaged they'll be.
Yeah.
If they figure they can,
And I think part of that is also the language when you're talking with them, is that try to think of it in terms of like you're not teaching them, but you're modeling, and so that it becomes conversational more than teaching.
Yeah.